Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be showing you how to fly the Airbus H125 helicopter. For those of you who are attempting the career involving helicopters, you probably got a little bit of experience with this. For everybody else, we're going to kind of show you sort of the tricks that I've learned after doing quite a bit of work with this thing, kind of how to fiddle with the avionics and stuff like that. So first things first, we want to make sure we remove that. Otherwise, you'll discover that the rotor blades do not move. We'll come up here, pop the pitot cover off. The best thing for this one is if you hold your mouse below it and click on it, it takes it off real nice. And of course, we want to go ahead and pop that engine cover off the back too. Let's go ahead and press Shift-C and climb inside. Now, this is a pretty Spartan helicopter in all the greatest ways. It's relatively simple. It's got a good stability system on it. It does a lot of things really well, and it does them very, very simply. As you can see here, we've got our checklist all kind of squared away. We've completed everything outside, so that's good to go. We're going to make our way all the way down to our before starting engine. Now, there's a couple things we need to do. One, of course, is to release the rotor brake. If you don't do that, embarrassment will follow. Make sure that handle is forward. Next, what you're going to do is you're going to make sure the fuel shutoff is forward. That's going to be this little handle right here. Just make sure it's in the open position, and you'll be perfectly fine with that. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the twist grip. It should be in the idle position. Now, that's this guy right here. You can change the mode, of course, by clicking. If I click, it goes to flight. Click again, you can see it goes to idle. Again, a simplified system here, which is not a bad thing for helicopters. We're going to go ahead and make sure the engine starting selector is set to the off position. I've floated above my head here. You can see it is off right now. Looks good to me. And we're going to make sure that the battery is on. So, of course, we're in the US. So we're going to turn on the battery, and we're going to go ahead and turn on the beacon light along with it. They call it anti-collision light on this one, which is goofy, but that's fine. What I'm going to do now is off the checklist is I'm going to float up here to these two displays. I'm going to hold my mouse over this little wheel. I'm going to go ahead and rotate it. Hard to read, huh? Don't worry about it. Come down here where it says bright and click that button a few times. And of course, we have a couple different pages. You can see right now we're kind of in the main torque page. We'll get another page a little bit later on. That'll give us some more options, but for now, that's perfectly fine for what we're doing. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make sure the lighting's set, which it is. Pedals are free. Heating system's all off, which it is. So now we're going to go ahead and flip on the fuel pump switch. The fuel pump switch is this guy right here. Pretty easy. You just click it to turn it on. There's not a lot of drama with that, really, which is kind of nice. We're going to go to the engine starting selector switch. You're going to love this. Watch this. Watch this. Click. I'm going to go ahead and cover it. Generally, you would not cover it until the engine has finished spooling up, but hey, for the purposes of this, you can see just how darn easy this thing is to get going. That's it. There's no drama back there. I don't have to push any special buttons or anything like that. It's just going to spin up itself. And of course, if we want to monitor the process, we can come down here. We've got our rotor RPM over here on the right. And of course, we have our torque as well as temperatures and things like that down here. We're just keeping an eye to make sure at no point does it exceed the temperatures. During startup, it's not unusual for it to get a little warm. Do you see how the screen changed on me? If that happens to you, you can just hit that button again. You can study the transmission temperature and the torques and all that stuff. You can see we're going to get pretty darn warm during startup. That is not unusual. Especially with helicopters here. The good news is it will slow down, and it'll start cooling down once the rotor gets going, and I can hear it getting pretty loud in my headphones here, so I have a feeling everything's working okay. So once we get this thing going, you can basically relax. You can see they're kind of scrolling between the two different modes. I can press the reset button if I don't want it to constantly kind of pop between those. You can hear everything's spooling down, and we've got ourselves plenty of power. Good time to make sure everything is running smoothly here. I can see that one of my generators is producing nothing. So one of the things you want to do next is you want to go ahead and flip that generator on, and you can go ahead and pop on the avionics as well. Let's see, start selectors on, engine parameters checked, set. Make sure the generator is on, check. A fuel pump is coming off next. We're going to come over here, and we're going to bop the fuel pump button just like that. We're going to make sure the starting setter guard is set. If you look, I did that already. That was naughty. I should never have done that. Avionics are going to be on. Now, of course, we've got the run-up. Pretty straightforward as far as running up in this one. I've got this lovely thing called an accumulator test. You just flip this open, and you bop that button, and all sorts of fun things happen. Again, accumulator is basically going to get you a little extra hydraulic pressure there. You're going to get all sorts of angry warnings and things like that. Don't worry about it too much. We're going to go ahead and close that once we're all set with that. Looks like the generator is producing power. Caution and warning panel. You're going to have a couple caution and warnings. You're going to have one for pitot, one for horn. Horn refers to the low RPM horn, and the pitot simply refers to the pitot static heater system. If that's something that really, really bothers you, you can turn the horn on, which you should anyway, by coming down here and bopping that button. Some of the other options, of course, if I go ahead and float down here, I love the fact that they put like your windshield wiper defrosting and stuff all the way down here. Other things I love the fact they put on your spare grip here. As you can see, you've got your hydraulic switch, you've got your ability to arm the floats in case you're going for a swim there. You've got all your de-icing controls right here along your left as well. Pitot button's going to be right there. So if you need to, you can flip that sucker on. That warning will go off, leaving you with this lovely twist grip warning. Everything else is set here. We reset that one. That looks good to me. Hydraulic cutoff switch. We can go ahead and check that if we want to go ahead and get a very angry message. It's easy to use. You just flip up this little switch, you click it, and you're going to get an angry thing that's basically going to cut off your hydraulics, making things a little less responsive on the helicopter. So just be mindful of that. Caution, again, we got that warning light. You saw it popped up, but it went back off. Looks good to me. That's all set. Warning panel, hydraulic, twist grip. We're now going to set this into the flight position. All I do is come down here and click once, and you'll hear the RPM. It's going to get very hot. There it is. Don't touch the collective, by the way, until this process finishes. Nice. Torque's coming back down, and we are awesome. Excellent. So that is all set up and ready to rock. I'm happy with this. I'm not going to worry about in-flight or anything. I'm actually going to shut that display off, so I don't have to stare at it the whole time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to where our GPS is and get it all set up. Setup on this GPS is very, 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 very simple here. All I'm going to do is I'm going to press my flight plan button. Normally what you do is you'd set up your departure. In this case, we're just going to pretend it's Wyndham, which is pretty close to us. We're actually at the hospital right now. And all we can do is we can set our destination, which is not too far away from us. So we're going to head up, well, let's see, do we want to go to Hartford? Yeah, we'll go to Hartford today. So HFD, just like that. I'll go ahead and dial that in. A word of advice, by the way, after you've dialed into the GPS, you're going to want to double check to see which mode this is and make sure this is in mode number 1 for nav 1 there. I'm going to press the back key. I'm going to go to the map, and you can confirm visually whether or not anything has appeared. If I were to actually hit the out key a couple times, you can see there is my course ready to go. If I wanted to cheat a little, I could actually come to this direct button. I could even go to select waypoint, and I could even dial in my destination directly for the purposes of this. Again, we can save this particular device for another day, and that is kind of a useful way to kind of get things moving for that particular purpose. All right, so everything looks good. Map looks good. Terrain looks good. Flight plan, again, everything's all we need to. This is a very, very simplified version of this, so we're missing some of the really, really nice bells and whistles, such as the display I really like, which makes it a little bit easier to kind of read and stuff like that, but just kind of keep that in mind. So everything's all set. Engines are booted. We're in pretty good visibility here. I'm just double checking here that everything looks pretty good to go. I've got my moving map. If I needed to, I could click on that, and I could do one of these things too. If there's something you're looking for as far as trying to get this, yeah, we can come to the flight planner page. We can come over the way down here, and you can actually kind of see everything as you need, depending on what exactly it is that you're trying to achieve for that particular flight. Enough chat, let's fly. So we're going to flip on the landing light. So the landing light switch is down here. The landing light switch will not work if you have it bound. It requires a separate switch that you have to bind if you're doing just airplanes. So takeoff on this is a relatively straightforward affair. It is a very well stabilized helicopter. We've got our right foot and our left foot, and keep in mind as we increase collective, which is going to be this guy down on the floor, it'll probably be your throttle. All you're listening for is what the engine wants to do. And again, you'll notice if I'm very slow with the collective, the torque rises slowly. You're not running. It's not trying to constantly adjust. So what's going to happen is as the helicopter starts to get light on the skids, which we'll see in just a moment here, you're going to notice it's going to have a really strong tendency to twist to the left. So what you're going to do is you're going to make a little J, almost like a reverse J. So we're going to take our stick. I'm going to go ahead and reduce the collective here, and I'm going to come down, and I'm going to come to the right, and I'm going to push my right foot at the same time as I start to increase my power again. So let's go ahead and increase the collective. We're going to get very light on the skids. What you're looking for here is just enough to get nice and in the air here. And again, it's going to take a pretty good amount of torque. We're pretty heavy here. And you can see we're just going to rise a couple feet off the ground. There's going to be about half a meter there. And all we're doing is we're just testing to make sure everything's within its normal bounds. Good time to kind of get a feel for the wind here. And again, this is your normal hovering skill. I'm satisfied. So what I'm going to do normally is we depart into the wind here. But since we're in such a small space, I'm just going to go ahead and use a standard takeoff. As you're starting to accelerate, you want to release pressure on your left foot. That's going to kind of cancel out that kind of effect there. All right, we're up in the air just like that. It is a quiet day in lovely Wyndham, Connecticut here. I'm going to reach down. I'm going to go ahead and pop off the landing light there. We don't need to stare at that. And now we've got ourselves airborne. So the big thing with helicopters is these are almost always VFR craft. It's not to say you can't fly it in IFR. It's just to say it would be a very interesting flight indeed if you were trying to fly one of these things in IFR. So I'm just going to kind of swing to my left here and start making my way towards the big city here. So of course the sun is absolutely blinding us, and we can't have that. So one of the buttons we have in the real world is this lovely little cloud control. And what you do is just go just like that, and then the cloud is no longer a problem. It is a very effective technique on any aircraft. I really, really like it. It's a feature they really added recently. No, can't do that in the real world, unfortunately. So cruising in this helicopter is relatively straightforward. There's no trim, unfortunately, at this point. They acknowledge the fact that this helicopter does not have trim on the official forums. I wonder what that switch is for. I'm going to ignore that for now. But if you did have trim, of course, you can make this life a little bit easier. A couple things you're going to be watching out for during transit with this particular helicopter. One is making sure that you're keeping the helicopter pointed in the correct direction. One of the interesting things you have with helicopters is you're pointing this way, but if you notice my little slip ball here, you'll notice it's massively off. One of the fun quirks of helicopters is you need to keep this ball not in the center, because then you'd be skidding. You need to keep it just to the side of the right when you're traveling normally. Another really, really useful tool you have to do that is if you look right here, you're going to notice this little string, which is kind of doing its little happy dance there in the wind. If I were to kick my anti-torque pedals, you'll notice that it'll tell me that I'm going too hard on it. If I don't touch my anti-torque pedals, see how it kind of shifts to the left? That just tells you you're flying sideways. What you're trying to do is to get it to point directly at the front windshield, which requires just a little bit of anti-torque pedal to kind of get you going here. So now that we're rolling, I'm just going to take a look at my little navigation. I'm going to swing to my right just a little bit here. We do have ourselves an HSI, but since we're not using VOR today, we're not going to use it. One of the nice things is my lovely state here is very easy to get around, so I don't worry about it too much here. Make sure all my instruments are all set up. Cruise speed for this thing is relatively straightforward. If you take a look down at my little indicators here, you'll notice we're chilling at about 110 knots, 108 knots. That's a pretty safe speed to be transiting. One of the things is you don't really want to go past 120 in turbulence, and the reason we don't want to go past 108 typically is that's going to be kind of a speed where if we're carrying anything, we have things dangling off of us, we want to be very, very cautious with it. One of the tricks I've learned flying helicopters for as long as I have in games is it's almost easier to not look at the vertical speed indicator. You tend to kind of chase after it. It's much easier to actually just look gently, if I can gently look, there we go, at the altimeter. Once you see the altimeter kind of stabilize, that's going to actually work really, really well for you as far as what you're trying to achieve. In this case, we're achieving about 1,700 feet. Now, one of the cool things is as we're kind of cruising around, I'm looking over on my left at my avionics, and I can see here that we're doing about 407 kilograms of fuel, which is plenty. It's about 2 hours 45. And you can see we're using about 7 of the lovely torques there, the FLI indicator there. Now, one of the cool things is if I can fly and grab the controls, you're going to watch me go out of 1,700 feet in a second here. If I press scroll, you can see here that we actually get a different display with other information for our flight. For example, you can see we're using about 70% of our peak torque, which is plenty. We can use a little more if we want to go a little faster, but it also means work well for our hand, basically. And of course, you can see our N1 there is chilling at a nice, comfortable 100% N1. Again, we're a turbine helicopter, making it nice and easy. So that's going to be the basics for actually operating the helicopter. Cruise altitude on this, it varies. Obviously, if you go up very high, the helicopter is really going to start to struggle. If you keep the thing relatively low, you run into the chances of hitting things on the ground. For our people who are going to be doing the missions that involve rescues and stuff like that, we'll go ahead and do a quick simulated landing with that in a moment here to kind of give you an idea of how to run the approach as well as kind of how to do it. One of the things you got to always do, too, is never, ever push forward on the stick. Don't do that. If you do that, you'll chop your tail off, and that's not desirable typically. So let's say we're running a typical rescue scenario, and we're interested in trying to land down at that person's field right there. I mean, it looks like a pretty good farm there. It's probably like Bolton or something like that. The first thing we have to do is we have to go down and we have to slow down. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab your collective, and you're just going to gently pull it back. Now, as you reduce your collective, you're going to discover that you don't have to push your controls so far forward. You can see also we're starting to lose a pretty smooth amount of altitude just right away. Helicopters don't like to descend quick. If this were a combat helicopter or something like that, we could probably get away with going down at, 2,000 feet per minute. Not that I'd recommend that in any helicopter, but you just have to be mindful of your passengers. When I cut that like that, passengers tend to get very, very grumpy on you for how quick you start to descend, so just be mindful. Again, I've not changed the position of my stick at all. So when you're going to be doing one of these landings, the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make what they call a recon pass. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take a nice gentle left turn here. Keep in mind, as you start to turn, the entire helicopter is going to want to pitch up on you as it starts to bleed speed very quickly. Helicopters are just like fighter jets in that sense. So when you start turning, things start slowing down very, very fast. So we're just going to be executing a nice relaxing turn here. Again, I'm not doing anything too crazy with my feet here. Trying to keep my life a little bit simpler. So I'm coming around. That's a pretty good altitude. There's our LZ. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to let the nose kind of come up without adjusting the collective. And you can see it gives you that nice kind of smooth thing. So looking at the left-hand side, we can see we've got ourselves a field. We've got some obstacles in that field. Looks like some large animals or something like that. So we just have to be mindful careful. Looks like there's some large animals in that field as well, so when we come down, we're going to have to be kind of careful. So whenever you're doing a landing with a helicopter, it's really, really important that you consider where the wind is going to be in order to make your life a little bit simpler. People who like to come in at really, really high speeds with the wing to your tail, you're going to find that you're going to run out of ground way faster than you're going to run out of everything else. So just be careful with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the nose come up just a little bit. I'm going to start bringing the collective back. I'm going to go ahead and switch over here to my scroll, switch back to the regular torque view. We're also going to flip on the landing light to let people on the ground know that, hey, we're going to come and do our landing. Now, in our scenario this morning, we don't actually have a wind, so it makes our lives a little bit simpler. So what I'm going to do is basically do my downwind leg here, and I'll just kind of keep an eye on that field. Obviously, we're trying to stay away from the cows. They're going to panic and stampede on us when we come ripping in there, so we want to be very careful. And we're just going to slowly start to slow down. Now, helicopters have the added challenge that when you get under the translational lift speed, which is under that green arc, it becomes much more challenging to maintain an appropriate attitude with the helicopter. So one of the things that gets very scary with helicopters is something called vortex spring state, where basically we descend into the turbulence, we wash up. You'll also notice that I'm using about 60% of my torque, and I'm not going very fast right now. As you transition to a hover, you will start to slow down and require more of the actual engine's power to keep you at a set altitude. So there's our objective. Again, this would be my base leg, if you want to imagine it. I'm just flying the helicopter, getting a field. In the real world, of course, the wind's coming from our left. So again, we can kind of visualize it like that. And all we're going to do is just kind of keep an eye on things. Remember, as you slow down, it becomes a little bit more dangerous. That looks pretty good. Again, I'm not pushing my stick forward. We'll come and take a nice gentle left turn here. And this is where our recon pass is very, very critical. Looking out on this field here, and I notice the fact that the field itself, it's not very even. So we're going to have to try to find a spot where we're not going to run into the dynamic tip-over point of our helicopter. Now, looking at my 12 o'clock there, I can see where that building is. There's kind of that road. And we also have to keep in mind that our rotor is a good 30, 40 feet wide. So we can't get too close to it, even though the helicopter is only a few feet wide. Always be mindful. All right, we'll kind of start sinking. In this real world, of course, you start kicking stuff up on the ground pretty much right away. And what you're trying to do is run out of speed as you just about to kiss the ground. But pull the nose up again. Collectives for altitude, not your stick. There we are. And all we're going to do is we're going to transition into a hover just a couple inches off the ground. Looks pretty good to me. We're just going to settle in. And just like that. Now, as you settle, remember anything you're doing, you want to do smoothly. Very nice. And you can see we have ourselves on the ground. Now, let's say in our scenario, of course, we wanted to go ahead and make a quick exchange or something like that. Start to kind of get us all shut down. Let's say we're going to hang out here for a little while. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to my handy-dandy checklist here, and we're pretty much ready to go. So shutdown is really, really easy. We center the cyclic, which we did. We put the twist grip in the idle position. You're going to get an angry alarm when you do this. So you want to shut the horn off before you do this. Going to hit that. You can hear everything spooling down. Very nice. Twist grip's good. Lights are off. Yep, see, they did it. I did it in a different order. That's okay. Engine starting selector is going to be in the off position. Very nice. We're going to go ahead and make sure the generator comes off next. Generator's easy. Just hit this little switch and drag it down like that. Looks good. Rotor brake. You don't want to really touch that until you're below 140 RPM. And if you take a look here, you can see we're still at 290 RPM. But this would be the handle that you're going to be grabbing. We're not going to do it because we're not mean. So we would push that. Rotor is going to be stopped. Anti-collision lights come off last. And battery comes off last as well. So as you can see, this is a very, very solid helicopter. It's a very, very stable. I think it's almost too stable. When you're first learning helicopters, this is almost hard because you need something that's a little more sensitive just to kind of get you in the idea of being able to control it at all time and making those micro corrections. Enjoy.